Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and I just got out of the shower, so my hair's really wet, so I don't even have my headphones on, so I hope the audio still sounds good. But for this video, we've got a fun one. This is every documented time that ice has been nerfed in Wizard101 PVP, and this is like I said, it's every documented time. So there's some between the release of Caramel and around the time of the Crying Sky Raid update that I'm a little bit blind to, so maybe there's some that I missed. I feel like there are some that I missed. They're just not in any of these dev diaries or update notes. So that's why don't we get started? So this is going to be just going from the summer of 2020, which is when the cascade really began. Ice up to this point was extremely good, all the way up until like the fall of 2020 really, but the summer was when it started to slip, and that was sort of when the devs' very obvious prejudice against the ice school became much more apparent, and we're going to go over that in this little dev diary. So, spell balance audit. Right, so ultimately I can't even find it here. I guess it's in a different dev diary, but how about that? Basically though, this is when Abominable Weaver went from, you know, around 1,000 damage, base damage on average, and it went down to 790 to 910, which is what it is today, and the 75% tower shield became a 50% tower shield. And this nerf, I think, was warranted, but it did take out Ice's main big hit, and that's something that that's what started the cascade. It's like Ice's biggest hit that Ice used a lot was gone, or not gone, but severely nerfed in this update. And yeah, it wasn't as good of an offense-defense move anymore. It was definitely a sizable nerf to the ice school. So, fun. So, there was that. And then, there were some other minor changes, I believe, in this update, but nothing to really mention here for the summer 2020 update. So, yep, that was the first one. A-Bomb lost a hefty chunk of its damage, and that was Ice's main hit. So let's move to the Caramel PvP update. This was the fall of 2020, and this was the update that made me quit back in 2020 for almost 3 years. So take that as you will. The main deal with this was that pre-enchants were gone, and it added a lot of RNG. It's like the enchant aspect of them, you know, that could have gone and I would have been fine as long as we could have kept packing hits inside, but we really couldn't because, you know, they were just they like cards like Abominable Weaver, treasure cards like Abominable Weaver weren't the easiest thing to come by, so we couldn't really do that anymore. So that sure was fun. But yeah, this was sort of where it's like this is why I quit, you know, way back when. But this in itself, I do think enchants going was a nerf that needed to happen, but that was across the board. It just hurt Ice a hell of a lot more than any other school, because what we were looking at was Ice, that extra damage on Ice's spells from pre-enchants were what made them good, and this was where Ice like really fell. And it was just very, I can imagine rather that it was tough after this update for Ice to really win too much, because it was just sort of, it was far weaker. And it's not like stats are today where you can do, you know, meager amounts of damage. Like no, this was, I'm saying this was doing, like, even with the Solar Surge, like, you had to pull these. This was a whole fiasco. I have videos on that from back then, but it's like, you needed a surge to do more than, I think, 1,000 damage on an open unbuffed hit. So that was really fun and cool. So Ice never really had good offensive stats before this, and everybody was like, ice mains back then were mostly okay with that because, you know, pre-enchants and all that really helped cover up the damage bit. The pierce bit, not so much, but it was a worthy trade-off for, you know, having Abominable Weaver as it was back then. So, ain't that something? So, yeah, losing pre-enchants was a big hit to Ice's damage output, and yeah, that's the second one. And then the third one, okay, so I quit because of this update, but I was entertaining coming back if they, you know, didn't screw up further. And December 9th, 2020, they screwed up further. And, you know, they fiddled with crit and block, and, you know, it's like, it was okay. The crit and block thing was okay. It was a new stat that you had to build, but Ice was good at that, so it's somewhat helpful. But yeah, it's like the death of pre-enchants. They said it would be temporary, it wasn't. So cool. These restrictions may not be permanent for 5th Age. They are. So, you know, Ratbeard has sort of buried himself in his own delusion 17 times over, or however many tabs I have open. So that's where we're at. So, some Munch gave this, so that was where this died completely. So how about that? And they ignored community feedback. This is all news. I talked about this way back then too. You can find it in my old videos, and I still stand by the positions I took in those old videos. So this is about Ice. This here is what's going on with Ice, and this was the total wipeout of Ice being like at all meta. It's like resist was still really good back then. Ice could get like high resist reliably, like 70 resist depending on the setup, but it's like this, dude, this was like Icebird going, sure, it did a lot of damage and it gave a blade. And, you know, Frozen Bats, this really could have stayed, and I think it could make a comeback today, but, you know, the devs never want to buff Ice. Ice Elf did ultimately need to go, I feel like, because it wasn't 2-pip dot, you know what I mean? So, you know, this was understandable, and then Arctic Zilla was doing a lot for 4 pips, but you needed 10 more accuracy, or really, I guess, 5 more accuracy for compared to Shad's. So, a lot of setups back then, you could fizzle this if you didn't have an infoul up. And back in the summer, they nuked, you know, infoul cast rates. That's why everybody switched to school auras for a little while. But with infoul gone and out of meta, this was a questionable nerf, in my honest opinion, to just outright ban this. Because it was a 70% accuracy card, and, you know, you had to run the risk of fizzling it with most setups. So, whiz, I guess. That's what's up. But this is the bread and butter of the video. Our data shows that Ice has been consistently at the top of the PvP rankings for years. Ice has quite a few problems of our making that we're trying to correct, some more quickly than others. Obviously, until we have a chance to overhaul Resist and stat audit, which we feel is the single most important change to Ice, we'll likely have to take targeted shots at Ice along the way. Targeted shots at Ice. So, you know, Ratbeard, you know, he brought out his Gatling gun, made 1 million holes in the Ice School with this update on December 9th, 2020. And, yeah, never really gave us any attention after that. It's like, this was a questionable nerf, this can come back. It never even needed to be taken out to begin with. I mean, pretty sure back then, it's like, Ice was the only school without a hidden buff, and like every other school had one, so very fun. Fun. So, that is the intent of these no PvP cards. We're just looking to take a bit of the offensive tempo away from Ice. Stats started to creep in this update, so it's like, yeah, it was just a very good update for everybody whose school did not start with the letter I. So, we realize this is insufficient to fix Ice. Nevertheless, this is a trend you should expect to see us continue in both the short and the long term, as we try to shift Ice back into a more defensive school identity, which has persisted to this day. Our cards have been getting, you know, hit left and right. It was a whole thing, and this is where we're at. Targeted shots at Ice, you know, coming up on 4 years ago, and we never, you know, received compensation, at least not anything permanent throughout the years. So, yeah, Ice, this was where Ice fell out of meta, and it has never recovered outside of a few temporary changes, which we'll get to. So, yeah, targeted shots at Ice. This was a sad day in the Ice School's history. So thank you, Ben Ratbeard Durbin, lead designer of King's Isle, for this update that totally killed my school. So, yep, Ice has never recovered. It's worse than Storm now, for a number of reasons, but we'll get to those too. So the next one, this was sort of this one was a stat nerf. They did say in this one, the December 2020 dev diary, that, you know, they needed to overhaul resist to really, like, change Ice and make Ice, I guess, not as oppressive, but they did it here in, what was this, the May of 2021 update? April 2021 update, okay, so, yeah, where is it again? So, here we are, you know, affected stat, PvE and PvP. They added these damage and stat caps, damage resist stat caps. And so the damage caps, you know, nobody was really complaining about these too much. I think this one might have affected Storm a little bit. Yeah, it might have affected Storm a little bit. So, yeah, 100 damage with a hard cap of 150, and there were diminishing returns. This is when that all of that started, right? So here is where the nerf is. 50 resist in PvP was where you would start to see diminishing returns with a hard cap of 70. Ice's setups were already breaking the 70 mark in some cases, and for them to implement a soft cap at 50, this was a direct buff to every other school, because Ice's tankability plummeted after this. They can't say that they want to make Ice a, you know, defense-oriented school in December of a year, and then immediately in April they go and do this, and immediately take away Ice's defense. So, yeah, it's not like Ice had offense at this point in the game anyway, so... Yeah, I wasn't around when this happened, thankfully, and I haven't really looked up any tier lists from back then, but I would not be surprised if Ice was placed, you know, 6th or 7th, depending on how, you know, awful Storm was at the time, because Ice and Storm, those two seem to be the constants, so how about that? But yeah, this resist intersection and resist limit directly hurt Ice, because it's like sometimes Ices would ward to bolster their defensive stats, and that got cut out of the game entirely here. And yeah, it's like Ice can't really, they couldn't defend well in this meta, so that's where that was at. The Pierce stat is unchanged at this time. This is another thing. Pierce has really gone up over the years, so yeah, Pierce getting better, and Pierce becoming way more accessible while this is a thing in the game. That was sort of another kick in the nuts that I'm glad I wasn't here for. So there was that. Anyway, cut to November of that same year, and we get Rochambeau, and this was when Ice's identity as, you know, shielding got added, and this, over the years, shields have sort of shifted, I guess, power value. I don't know, but power in shielding is only as good if the counters are not as good. And this happening, shields becoming Ice's thing, was what sort of, through further updates, just it's like Ice's abilities in PvP were just limited to how well they could leverage shields, because Ice could leverage shields back then. They can't now, ironically, so how about that? But Fire and Myth both have very, very good shield counters, and shields, they've fluctuated in power beforehand, but shield gambits owned by Death and Myth, not so much Ice, have severely influenced the meta, because you don't want to eat a Myth Gen, you don't want to eat a Death Oni. And it's like people pack Minotaur from the Myth School to specifically counter Fantastic Djinn and Doom Oni, because those two are very, very strong 11 pip hits that can do like half your health unbuffed. So yeah, people started packing the counters for these two schools specifically, but then Ice got caught in the crossfire. So Ice, it's like this was a nerf in the way that it shuffled around in terms of how viable it was. So yeah, man, Ice, this is another thing. It's like Ice having shields as its identity made sense, but these two schools, Myth and Death, being good, indirectly meta-nerfed Ice, in the sense that everybody was packing counters. So it's like Ice just got caught in the crossfire. It's like you see Fires using like Glacial Golem and Set Shields today. It's like they do that for the Storm matchup, which is supposed to hard counter them, and they do, but Ice just gets caught in the crossfire, and that just sort of seals it for the Fire. It's like the Fire can easily beat an Ice now, barring, you know, Storm accuracy and all that. Even if the Ice does have Storm accuracy, it's like there's things Fires can just do. So yeah, shield counters being better than shields has sort of, or it's at least discouraging shielding is a nerf to Ice, and Ice not being able to leverage shields is a nerf in itself. I really think there is, you know, an opening to work with that on the developer's part, but they haven't for a long time. And yeah, that's a Rochambeau just as a concept nerf to my school. So next up, we've got these little patch notes from the Novus update a year later, and you know, like 2022 is sort of a blind spot for me, because I didn't really ever look too much at how Ice was doing in that year in terms of PvP. I know that there was that Highlander gear that sort of helped with Ice's resist, but there were still limits in place for a long time. So it's like Ice couldn't even really use that all that well. So yeah, it's like Ice could finally tank during the Highlander gear meta, but it was still like it just didn't have the tools that it needed. And another thing that I wanted to mention, just for as long as I can, is the fact that Ice's library has been getting slowly destroyed over the years. I don't remember where Frostfang got banned, but yeah, Frostfang got banned somewhere in here. People would use that, to my knowledge, to have like a strong Ice, you know, hit and shield in some cases. So yeah, where was it at? I can't remember, but it was in here somewhere. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll come across it at some point. But basically, like we saw just a lot of, you know, Spellement changes and how those Spellement paths worked out and that sort of deal. And there was something down here. Okay, so for spell changes, this is where we are at on that. So this was what things were like from the Novus update all the way up until recently. For some of these, they've reevaluated some of these gambits, like Evil Snowman, but a lot of these have largely remained unchanged. So the first one that we're looking at here is Frost Beetle, and you know, this was a decent change because it gave a chromatic shield for gambiting a shield on yourself. So that was a decent way to leverage shields, but you didn't like gain a shield. So it's like I use this a little bit in place of Steel Ward, but ultimately I don't use it today. So it was an interesting change, I will say that, but I don't think it was too great in the long term. So, you know, it was largely inconsequential, rather. Snow Serpent, this looks funny. It's like two random absorbs that do nothing, but you could at least like stack these up if you were to spam Snow Serpent, and I guess maybe try and leverage shields that way, because there were still ways to leverage shields as we'll look at. But Then it became the worst gambit in the game, so that's where we're at. So how about that? Evil Snowman. This was one that I spammed a lot. This really helped with Ice's tank ability back then. But it used to give a 60% chromatic shield, but this was the update when it changed to a weakness counter. And it would, clear 1 or 2 negative charms after it hit, by the way. So it was a good counter to vampire and threefold spammers, but that was about it. And it didn't really give you much in the way of like actual leverage. Like you would get some chromatic shields, which are cool, and you'd get some ice traps, which were also cool, but ultimately they didn't really affect too much. 25% here, 25% here. This is like heading into a slightly stronger brace. So, what next? This was when... Oh yeah, Wyvern got nerfed at some point in here too. So the traps became worse, but... Yeah, this was when Blighthound sort of became less of a blade punisher and more of a curse punisher, but punishing curses and just weaknesses in general in this way never really resonated with me. I had a strat in I think November last year where I tried to use Blighthound and like bait Banshee back when it was still, making a ton of weaknesses and all that, so I could just farm the infects forever. But ultimately it's not really all that great. So it gave me some good hits at some points, but ultimately you don't see anyone using this. And this got nerfed, by the way, in recent history as well. So how about that? But this was the saving grace for Ice within the last 4 years, and this was what brought Ice back into the spotlight. Colossus, like a 6-pip spell that gambits, like shields for 65% ice traps before you hit, which I thought was really cool. It's like this made Ice good while staying in its own identity. And this was like a damage type deal that Ice just had never seen before. It's like beforehand, Colossus would do a bit of extra damage if you had a shield, and it was good before this, but this made it so much better. And this was when you finally saw Reg Ice getting back on the boards. I think this was when Cass came up. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, Colossus meta, that really helped the Ice a lot. So it was a good time to be an Ice Wizard in early 2023. So yeah, it was nice, but it also didn't last because 65% ice traps are kind of crazy. So how about that? Yeah, I don't really think. Yeah, there wasn't really anything. Yeah, there wasn't too much. This was a buff. The gambits, at least, that Ice had were a buff, and they did more damage and all that. And Kelvin's Icy Gaze, previously known as just the PvP Scion of Ice, it did a lot of good damage if you had 4 shields on you, and it was a good shield gambit. But of course this got nerfed as time went on, so fun, ain't it? So yeah, then we lost Shatterhorn and Freeze Ray, and yeah, so this was a net positive update for Ice. But it's like Colossus, the two saving graces here being Gambits and Colossus being nutty. We lost those pretty quick afterward, so yeah, down it went. So next nerf, where's it at? Any additional spell changes? Okay, so this is another one of those. So okay, where are the ice spells? Down here. Okay, so this is when we lost Colossus. Damage increased, or reduced on the max tier, ain't that something? And got the traps reduced from 65% to 35% and moved them to after the hit. So it's like, I don't understand why you nerfed everything, you know what I'm saying? It's like, come on, man. It's like, what are we looking at? It's like this was the loss of Colossus, and this happened May 31st of 2023. So Ice had Colossus for a little while, but ultimately lost it in the end. So, yep, sounds about right. Anyway, update notes from the Crying Sky raid. Where was I here? Okay. Right, okay, so this was why I have this brought up. So August 31st of 2023, like a couple weeks before I came back. I think it was literally 2 weeks on the dot. But Shadow Enhanced spells now cost 2 Shadow Pips in advanced content. This was another direct nerf to Abominable Weaver. So, Shad's costing 2, right? It's like Ice couldn't Weaver as much anymore. It's like Weaver was still a good offensive tool, you know, as stats sort of fell away and Solar Surge got banned, and it's like Weaver was still sort of a saving grace for the Ice school, but it's like then this came in and you can't Weaver as quick anymore, and you know you can't Weaver in Shrike. You know, it's Ice just lost a lot of pressure potential with this, and it's like this was done in response to the Burrower gear meta being, you know, you had to open a pack and just spam it and run 4-piece Shad because it was the most nutty gear in the game, right? So it's like this change had to happen to reduce pay-to-win nonsense, but ultimately that pay-to-win nonsense was a problem that the devs created, and Ice ended up indirectly suffering for it. So, meta nerf again. So, fun. Alright. So, yeah, and this is how it stayed. But now we're at a point, and I wanna briefly touch on this. I have seen talk that they might be considering bringing this back down to just 1 Shadow Pip. But it would come at the cost of either like some of the damage or utility. And dude, like it's like I can get by on this. It's like 2 Shads, you know, I can still threaten good combos and take buffed A-bombs when I can, and those are really helpful, but Abominable Weaver, despite it costing 2 Shads, is still my main hit because, you know, it's like Lord of Winter and Calvin's Icy Gaze, you know, those are high pip spells that leverage shields, but like I said before, shield counters are too good right now, so I can't really use those and leverage my shields like I want to. So Abominable Weaver is what I still fall back on, and with Tamauji, you know, on the chopping block, hurting 0.4%, I'll go over that too towards the end of the video, so yeah, this was a nerf, but it still didn't really change much for Ice. It's like, it definitely made Ice worse because, you know, Ice couldn't Abominable Weaver as much anymore, but it's like Ice sort of had to roll with this one, and Ice has rolled with it somewhat okay. So yeah, somewhat okay. Because Weaver is still our main hit in a lot of people's decks, so yeah, that was sort of tough. And then, what else do we have? We had, okay, May 1st, 2024. Did I just leave this tab open? I think that I may have. Okay, maybe I can find something here, because this was the Nightmare update. Okay, I guess I can't find anything here, but ultimately, what happened in this update with the Nightmare update was that the devs showed Ice a little bit of love. Colossus, the traps on Colossus, you know, they weren't moved to before. I would have taken that, you know, 35% Ice traps before would still be good if it was gambiting his shield, but what happened was Scion, Ice's Scion, got buffed from doing, I think, what was it, 1705, something like that, on the gambit, to 1940 as sort of a reevaluation of shield gambits, which the devs were doing. But like I said before, let me where was it? Where was the Rosham dev notes? Right. But because of Doom Oni and Fantastic Djinn's prevalence, Ice Scion got nerfed again. And So did Colossus. I don't know why we lost Colossus in that update, because, you know, it was getting 50 traps, and I was talking to Cass back when this was, you know, going on, when it was still a thing for like a week or two, and I told Cass, like, you know, like, we could try running Colossus again, because it's 50 traps, and you could use it as a combo. But yeah, then they changed it again. And then I also think somewhere in there, they totally took out the mechanic of gambiting shields for these traps. It's like, I guess they saw that we wanted the stronger traps back, so they changed it by slashing the damage even more on it, and changing Colossus to be gambit 3 curses for 55 traps. And the 55 traps are good, but you would have to threefold to like even use the gambit on that. So it's like, I can't get behind that. Nobody uses Colossus anymore. It's like 55 traps, they might seem enticing, but having to run threefolds in your deck as an ice when you're already not using, you know, Iceburn Djinn, which also got nuked, that's not gonna work. So yeah. And then I also want to touch on something else. This, when these changes were live, for, you know, the 1 to 2 weeks that they were, we saw, like, it's like Ice was finally okay for a moment, because Ice could leverage shields. Shield counters weren't as insane as they are now, but Ice could leverage, you know, shields. And what happened was, the devs had this oversight where they let Fire Shark on a new pet hit 5 times across all of its damage values, and that held Q hostage. I mean, like, without a doubt. And then Gravestorm also healed for 100% on the drain. So PvP was unplayable for the 2 weeks that Ice was buffed. So how about that? Ain't that something, Tam? Ain't that something? I also just briefly wanted to mention how we lost Lord of Winter's top path when the Arc 2 Spellements got added, so it's like we don't even have a 10-pip hit. So, fun for that. Fun for the whole family with that. And so that brings us to the 31st of July, 2024. And this is the most recent update that I'll cover in this video, where Ice got nerfed. There's a lot that I'm sure that I missed. I wasn't playing, you know, these 4 years, but if y'all have any, you know, holes to fill in the comments, do let me know, because it's really sad to see the fall from grace. And one thing I didn't mention, I don't even remember. I think like Polar Swarm got taken out in this exact same wave. I don't know why it wasn't listed, but yeah, Polar Swarm got taken out, and Death was allowed to keep, you know, Poison and Black Widow, when all Ice had was Frostbite for all these years. So how about that? So yeah, so spells. Alright, what have we got? So Deathly Duffs became a better blade counter, so did Frost Giant. King Art, nope. This did not become a blade counter like we all wished it would. And then Woolly Mammoth lost damage. I saw some of my friends who play Reg Ice carrying this because it did good damage, but then it lost damage for some reason. I think they wanted to make it more of a counter card, but yeah, tough. So okay, like I was saying about Black Widow and Poison. So Black Widow banned, Poison banned, in terms of TC. So these two needed to go because Death was, you know, insane. And it's like, you know, Ice is still the only class that has been explicitly stated to have taken targeted shots over the years from the devs. But it's like, I think the devs understood that they needed to take, you know, targeted shots at Death after, you know, 4 years of it being good. So it's like, I guess the Death mains know how I feel now. So yeah, but at least Death is still viable, Ice is not. So there's also a number of stat increases that have happened over the years, and Ice has just gotten the short end of the stick on all of those increases, because every other school's stats, you know, their offensive stats, their damage and pierce has gone way up, where Ice has lagged behind. There is currently a 22% delta between Ice's max pierce of 46, technically it's 47, but it gets rounded down because spaghetti code, and Fire's max pierce of 68. So, fun. I've probably said that a million times by now, but it's like Fire is better at piercing Ice's high resist than Ice is good at piercing Fire's low resist. So it's like Fire's high stat being Pierce is better at piercing, you know, Ice's high stat than Ice's low stat is against Fire's low stat. So it's like Fire has us beat in both pierce and resist in terms of the damage disparage in whatever in a head-to-head matchup. And yeah, man. That'll finish things up for the existing updates. But I wanted to talk about one more thing, because in the next patch, I don't know when this will be, and I hope it's not for a while, but in the next patch, Ice will be losing Tamauji and the pet card Lord of Winter. And pet card Lord of Winter, you know, it functions like old Lord of Winter did 7 pips, and it does pretty good damage, and then it also takes away 3 pips. And I've never used this personally. I actually have a PvP pet made on a Lord of Winters, so maybe I give it a shot. But for this to be, it's like that's another targeted shot at Ice. It's like Ice is just, it's like I always joke, you know, Ice gets nerfed every update, but it's not a joke, so ain't that fun. Oh, and I didn't even mention, I should have said something. Frostbite TC got banned in the July 31st patch, so that's another one out. Fun. At least we still have main deck, but we lose a bit of damage on this, so, and we have to cycle it in and out, so, you know, we can pull it when we don't want to pull it, and we gotta save it for later, and then we might not pull it and deck fail, so how about that? But yeah, Tamauji and Lord of Winter are confirmed to be going in the next patch, and the devs' rationale for this was that they didn't want any treasure cards, for Tamauji at least, being 20% over the set school's DPP. Now, Tamauji does 625 to 705, which is 20.4% over Ice's DPP of 83, and 0.4%. There are content creators who have, you know, discussed, I actually don't think he talked about it explicitly on video, but Sauce mentioned, you know, like, why is this being treated the same as the, like, balances pet card Hydra, which is like 40% over DPP, so it's like there's 19.6% delta there. But Tamauji is being treated the same as item card Hydra. Tamauji, Cam actually posted a list in the official Discord back when he was, you know, trying to gauge community feedback from it. Tamauji was at the top of his shit list, so yeah, and it took community members suggesting that Hydra be added to that list for him to actually look into it. So yeah, man, the devs totally aren't prejudiced against Ice or none. Thank you, Kanye. Very cool. So that's where we stand. It's like, these are all the nerfs that have happened to Ice over the years. There's a lot that I missed. And we know for a fact that another one is on the horizon. It has been confirmed that another one is on the horizon whenever the next patch happens. So, I'm tired. I am tired. And, yeah, the devs, I hope they show Ice some love at some point. We have been suggesting forever to give us a shield, either conditional or gambit spell, for some extra damage, or like traps before hit. Sort of like how old Colossus was, both versions of old Colossus. But it's kind of wishful thinking, I'm going to be honest. So that's where we're at. That's the current state of Ice. I would not recommend doing Ice PvP right now. Not even PvE either, because, you know, PvE has thankfully gotten gutted, but that does take out Ice's other avenue. So yeah, man, I'm going to suffer through these last 12 games of the 50 games video and then probably drop the series there because, you know, ice keeps getting worse. So, how about it? But anyway, thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more, and I will see y'all later.